Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another session of Healthy Hints from Pam. Our topic this evening is COVID-19 and mental health. Of course, we all know that mental health is a topic that most people don't want to talk about because of the stigma. And, I read an article not too long ago that said we don't want to talk about it because it's taboo in the Black community. But COVID-19 has brought it to the forefront and made us talk about it. You can't turn your television on without seeing a public service announcement about it, or you can't watch a news channel without them give you some type of statistics about it. So May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and this evening we're going to discuss how COVID-19 has affected our mental health and mental health in general. So get your questions ready, and I'm looking forward to a great discussion. Our first guest this evening is Dr. Sabrina Gunn. Dr. Gunn is Chief of Behavioral Health at Health Services Incorporated, River Region Health Center located in Montgomery, Alabama. And her passion is increasing mental health awareness and advocating for minorities who are often misrepresented in the mental health area. She enjoys playing the piano, investing in her community through volunteering, reading, and most of all, raising her 10-month-old twins. So, good evening, Dr. Gunn, and welcome to our panel today.
Thank you. Good evening,
Dr.
everyone.
Dr. Gunn, tell us your thoughts. Give us your thoughts this evening about COVID-19 and mental health.
Yes, well, um, I would like to start by saying I feel like COVID-19 has brought out negative things as well as positive things. We can always find the silver lining or always look at things optimistically, no matter how bad they are. It's not to take away um, the millions of people who have passed away from COVID 19 who have been affected by it. But I do believe that it has caused us to really put things in perspective and to really value things that we once weren't valuing. And it also uncovered some things that we weren't really willing to address. And what I mean by that is, I can think of a few patients, and I can remember as clear as day that I had a patient who was coming to my office, and there was this burden and guilt that he had of the wash, rinse, repeat of life, if you will, where he was so consumed in working, providing for his family, doing all these things, and not being able to spend time with his family. And then COVID-19 hit, and he was forced to stay at home. And when I saw him a few months after, the mandatory masking and everything was going on, he said, "You know what? I call COVID-19 a blessing because I have time with my family." Now, is that everyone's story? No, it's not everyone's story. There have been people who have been negatively affected by COVID-19, and they have realized that I can't keep up with the wash, rinse, repeat of life and continue to have my depression. I cannot continue to hide behind my anxiety. I cannot continue to hide behind my mental health issues. And so many people have been coming to the office saying, "You know what? I need help. I have finally realized that I need help." So COVID-19 itself, of course, has caused a lot of us the world to quarantine, and that can bring isolation and feelings of depression. There has been big adjustments. I don't have to tell the parents out there how school has been going. Virtual school in the world as we know it has been a big adjustment. So we have to realize and we have to make sure that we're tuning in to certain symptoms of depression, of anxiety. We think of depression all the time as just sadness, crying all the
Mhm.
time. But depression is much more than that. It's decreased pleasure in activities or things that you once loved, or just having a decreased pleasure in life in general, feelings of guilt, worthlessness, low self esteem. Anxiety is not always nervousness and anxiousness. It comes out as irritability and anger, being short tempered. And when you feel these feelings, when you have these thoughts, you just know something's not right. It's important during COVID-19 to talk about it. And it's important to get that support. Like I said, some people have realized that it's helped them to slow down. And sometimes some
Mm.
people have realized it's helped them to realize they need help. And I wonder if it never happened, what would people have done? Would we have been on this race to nowhere?
Mm.
And if the world didn't have to take a pause, sometimes you just have to take a pause. I wonder what would have happened. So, in all things, give thanks. We give thanks to God for everything, and I thank God for what He's doing and how He does things, because only He could do it the way He does it. And I'm also thankful that He's kept me and He's kept my family. And that's another thing, I've really seen the hand of God in everything, because everyone around me has been sick. There have been so many people sick, but He has allowed me as a healthcare worker to go into the battlefield every day and come out unscathed, if you will. Raising children, that's another thing. Raising children, there were so many babies born in 2020 during this quarantine. And it really showed us what we were made of. And I think the sequelae and the aftermath and the after effects of everything, we're going to still continue to see it, the good and the bad. If it was good for you, that's great. Tell your testimony. If it's bad for you, get help so you can get to that point where you can be like those and tell your testimony too. So that's just
That's
a
great.
real broad overview of what I've been seeing as a believer in Christ, a believer in God, and a psychiatrist so far with COVID-19 and mental health.
Thank you for that. Um, our next guest is the counseling couple. We have Carlos and Seneca Bean. Carlos is with the College of Access program. He's a college access program administrator for the state of Ohio and a licensed professional counselor for key counseling and consultation. Seneca is a family and community engagement coordinator for the Columbus Public Schools and a licensed school counselor. So, our counseling couple, can you all tell us uh, what your aspect is of COVID-19 and mental health?
Sure.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sister Forney. Um, Mike, if you wouldn't mind pulling up the PowerPoint presentation that we have, we'd like to, obviously, since March of 2020, we have gone through a lot. It's been an interesting time. And as Dr. Gunn mentioned, many of the elements of the pandemic have been tough, but some of the elements of the pandemic have actually been a blessing, depending on how you look at things and how you've been going through things. And so, one of the things that we learned early on is you have to really think about, are you building or are you breaking during this pandemic? And so I want to keep reiterating that thought with everyone. Are you building or are you breaking? And that's a choice, but one that we all have to make.
All right. So, for you visual learners, that is why we have the slides here. We want to make sure that we have some things to anchor our conversation. But what we'll talk about this evening is acknowledging where we've been. We're a year or so into this pandemic. And while it appears as if there are some silver lining or some end in sight or something happening, we still have gone through a lot. And so we want to talk about that and some of the feelings and emotions that came along with that. And then we want to talk a little bit about what's happening today. And we all want to know when this will be over, right? What's happening next? When will this be over? And then we'll just have a few little tips and resources as we move along.
Absolutely. So if we can go to the next slide, the first thing we want to do is really acknowledge that we've come through a lot. Thinking back to, January of 2020, and just thinking about that time frame to now, we have literally come through a lot. And I can remember being in Orlando in February of 2020, right before things got bad, and seeing folks in masks and saying, you know what, that's not going to hit Columbus. That's not going to hit us. And then a month later, we were home. If you went outside, you had a mask on. Everything changed overnight. We didn't understand the pandemic. We didn't understand that when you saw people outside, how you could behave with them. You know, we didn't know if you went to the store, if you saw someone and they decided not to wear a mask, whether to let them have a piece of your mind or keep on walking past them. You know, we didn't know if a vaccine was coming. And then even when it came, should we take it?
Mm-hmm. And when we talk about mental trauma, we're talking about, schools. One thing that we say in schools, everyone has been through, and not just in school, everyone's been through some form of trauma as a result of this. You may have not had a terrible experience, but this was a very just different situation for everyone with a lot of unknowns. And so when we think about those mental traumas with schools, we were hybrid, we had to restart. There were things that students didn't understand, but we had to be flexible in that space and understand that we can't always control everything. But we do know that the Lord is doing, he controls this world. And so we definitely had to be flexible, also working from home. And if you have children, trying to manage school from home, all of those things were different and had their own stressors. And then also the re-traumatization of everything that has happened. We see a lot on social media. We see a lot on TV. And people sometimes will have to stop following some people or some things so that they will not continue to replay all of these things that have happened. So that's a little bit when we're talking about those mental traumas, those things that we have definitely been seeing.
Yeah, and then when you think about, you know, November, the elections, January, the riots, you know, January, new leadership in government, like that, those were the big national things that affected us here in America. That would have happened with or without the pandemic, but we were dealing with the pandemic along with those things. The police brutality, the senseless deaths of many Black and brown folks across the country. The conviction of Derek Chauvin, which was on one end great, but then at the very same time, right here in Columbus, a young girl gets shot by the cops. And so that whole situation was heavy on a lot of us. And then when you think about just Franklin County, where a lot of us are, the number of killings in the city have literally doubled since last year. And it's not even summertime yet. So, you know, we haven't even got to the warm season when typically things get really bad. But that's a lot to think. That's a lot to think about, a lot to deal with.
Right. And then, you know, the last part of that is then there's also grief and loss that comes along with that, right? We've had all of these things happen, and it can be grief and loss of people and things, because people are grieving that they can't just go out and do whatever they want to do. And there was a long period of time where people couldn't see their family members because we had to be quarantined, or people didn't have their shots, or whatever the case may be. And so as we think about all of those things that we just laid out, there are many, many feelings and emotions that came along with that. And so we just wanted to kind of highlight some of those major things that have happened, but there were so many of them.
Very true. And before we go to the next slide, it's really about, you know, acknowledging what we've been through. So often we go through things in life and we don't take that moment to really sit back and think about everything we've been through. And not to like wallow and be depressed about it or be sad about it, but to really understand what you've been through, and to even give yourself props for getting through it. That's an important step in terms of being able to get to that next stage. And a lot of times we just don't do that. So, Mike, if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide, what we'll talk a little bit about is what's happening today. Obviously, you all know the virus is very, very real. The virus is still alive. The vaccine has been proven effective. Both of us have taken the vaccine and we are fine. We're doing great. In Ohio, every citizen 16 and above can get the vaccine. That's the case across most of the states in the country. And I think they're going to reduce that age here soon with going down to 12 here in a little bit, depending on how the studies go. However, there are many people who have decided against the vaccine, and I'm not here to tell you whether you should or shouldn't get the vaccine, but I am here to share my experience with it. And I'll tell you that. So I got the Pfizer shot. The first shot had a little arm soreness, felt like I had lifted some weights, but it wasn't that bad. The second shot was a little rougher on me. I had chills for about 5 minutes, and I was really hungry. I don't know what that was about. That was really strange, but I was really hungry. But that was the worst of it for me. Now, everyone deals with the vaccine differently. That's just how I dealt with it. But I think it's important to remember that, as of right now, we know there was one death that they believe was tied to the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. We know that because they pulled Johnson & Johnson down. But we also know that there are 3.2 million people globally who have died from getting COVID. We know there are nearly 600,000 people nationally who have died from getting COVID. And right here in Ohio, 20,000 citizens have died from getting COVID. So get the vaccine, lower chance. Sit around and wait, it's a higher chance. Those are just the numbers. The other thing we have to think about too is that we have to be aware that the vaccine is going to operate differently depending on where you go in the country. So in Ohio, things kind of go up and down, same in other states. What we saw recently, for example, in Oregon, is the numbers have gone up quite significantly recently, but they were down very low. It's important to know what's happening in the different parts of different states, particularly if you decide to travel, because things may operate a little differently depending on where you go. Let's go to the next slide. So what happens next? When will all this be over? And this is a picture of kids, bored to death. You all who have children have probably seen your kids looking like this. I know we've seen our kids looking like this. Here's what I'll share. I remember the night that we were home before the state shut down. It happened to be my birthday. And I remember that Governor DeWine, our governor, came on television and he was telling folks, they were asking him, would you go out to eat? And he said, you know what? I don't care if it was a chicken dinner. I'm not going out to eat anywhere. He said it's something like that, but he was like, I wouldn't go out if I were you. And I remember coming home, my wife wanted to have a birthday party for me. And I was like, babe, Governor DeWine said he wouldn't go to a chicken dinner tonight. We shouldn't have a party. We still had it. But I remember that feeling of, oh my goodness, this thing is real. Like we're about to, it's going to shut down. And so, our leadership, between, Governor DeWine, President Biden, what they have been saying consistently more recently is that by the 4th of July, hopefully things will turn back to normal. We know as God-fearing individuals, God is in control and he's going to determine when this thing's going to go away. But our leadership is saying that we believe that maybe by July, things will become a little bit normal. Here are some things to consider regardless of when things go back to normal. First, masks are probably going to be a part of our new normal for a while. And the truth is, we don't know who's been fully vaccinated unless you live with the person, but you don't know who's been vaccinated and who hasn't. So if you go outside, you should wear your mask. Currently, children under 15 cannot get vaccinated. That may change here soon. Children have and will continue to get COVID, and some may not recover. So we have to be mindful of that. Again, and same, adults have and continue to get COVID, and some also may not recover. So, as I think about ways to talk to you all about how to stay on top of things, there's a couple of things that I would recommend. One thing that we do consistently, we watch the news. And so I recommend watching the news to get information. If you don't like the news, go to coronavirus.ohio.gov. It's one of the best resources to get updated information for Ohioans. I'm sure every state in the country has something similar, but they break down tips and tools on that website. And then also do your own research to make sure that you understand what's happening out there. But the main message I want you to get from this is don't assume. There are so many citizens who assume and don't know the facts, and that's what drives their thinking. Just be as informed as you can be, and that will get you to a place where even though we don't know when things will be over or when this, what happens next, you'll be prepared for what's next. And then our next slide.
And we only have two more. Okay. So we'll just run through a couple of tips because we talked about a lot of things that could be triggering for some because we don't know where people are on their journey or what's happened. And so there are some self-care habits that are worth prioritizing and that you can put into place. And one is know how to say no, right? Know how to say no. A lot of times we say yes to a lot of things, and we know that the more things we have, anxiety can definitely come into play, especially when you have a lot of things happening around you. And so prioritizing and really thinking about what are those important things and knowing how to say no is important. Making your own positivity list or gratitude list with everything going on around. If you could just think of one thing, it could be, thank God I woke up this morning. That could be your one thing. But one thing can lead to two can lead to three. So think about those things that make you are positive in your life, and then reflect on what you're grateful for. Again, there has to be something, one thing that you can start to think about. And if you are like me, you like prayer journals and gratitude journals and scriptures and all kinds of things that can help you get through. Injecting humor or some of those things. Try to, find something that is lighthearted that will make you smile or laugh. Resting well and listening to music are definitely good things, and also eating well are some of those tips. And then feast your eyes, and that really means really reading things that are uplifting and inspiring, your word, getting in your word, feeding your mind and spirit with those things that are positive. I've been trying to read the Blue Zones of Happiness to see what these happy people are doing, and just to put some positivity in a space that could be very negative.
Yeah, and speaking of feast your eyes, at the beginning of this pandemic, I made the decision to read a verse, or not a verse, but a chapter in the Bible, at least one chapter every day. And so right now I'm in 2 Samuel. And I have to say, I didn't realize how shady Saul is. It's been a really interesting read. It's so fascinating. So yeah, I've been reading my word. I'm in 2 Samuel, and I'm just reading a chapter a day. So that's been, feasting my eyes, really getting that knowledge in. Another tip is use your hands, create something with your hands. That can be helpful. Get physical. Make sure you're getting that physical exercise in. That helps to get the blood flow going and get your mind feeling better and all those good things. Don't forget your sense of smell. I know every once in a while, Dr. Wise will mention something about a cake he made. And even though I didn't have a lick of that cake, just the way he smiles, it makes me feel good. Like, man, that cake must have been really good. Don't forget your sense of smell. That's helpful. That makes you smile. This is a real one. Get help if you need it. We all need help at different times. Don't be ashamed to ask for help. We all need help. Organize your environment. If you live in a messy environment, when trouble comes, it's difficult to deal with. It's going to be difficult regardless to deal with trouble, but it's even more difficult when your life is messy. So organize your environment. Learning something new, keep your brain going during this time. And then finally, make sure to connect with others, whether that's face to face safely, virtually, a phone call, a text, just reaching out to people to check on them and see how they're doing.
Yes. And then next slide, last but very not least, we did not want to leave you without a list of resources. And so there are many, many different resources that people can use. And I know there's a lot of words on this slide, but definitely making sure that if you need help, you get help. And so this list of resources is just for those who would need it and need that support. And then most recently, we heard for children, Nationwide Children's Hospital came out with On Our Sleeves today, actually. That information just came out. But again, making sure that you get the help if you need the help, or take some of these things, these tips, and put them in your toolkit. But please just make sure that we are healthy and taking care of ourselves. And that is all we have for this evening.
Sister Forney, you might be on mute.
Oh, you can't hear me?
Now we can hear
Now
Now
you.
we
we
Well, I
can.
can.
haven't touched. Oh, because I haven't touched anything. Okay. I just wanted to say that although our topic tonight is COVID-19 and mental health, I also want to talk about mental health in general. Okay. So once we get done here, I do have some in general type of mental health questions that I'm going to ask you, but I wanted to get through the speakers first before I went to that. So, Dr. Wise, hi, Dr. Wise.
Okay, can you hear me? You can't hear me. Okay, well, I don't know what to do about. So, were you talking to
Yeah,
me or were you
yeah,
talking to
yeah.
Don?
We can hear you, Dr. Wise.
Okay, which wise were you trying to talk to? And now we can't hear you. We can't hear you, Ella.
Okay, but I haven't touched anything, so what?
I got it. I got it.
Okay. I forgot we have two
Got it.
Dr. Wises here tonight. Excuse me. This is for Dr. C. Dexter Wise III.
That's
Dr.
me.
Wise is Dr. Wise is senior pastor at our church. And I was saying that although our topic tonight has been COVID-19 and mental health, I do want to talk a little bit about mental health in general. Okay. But Dr. Wise, I want to ask you, um, can you tell us what role spirituality and religion plays in mental health?
Okay, well, to do that, I would like to ask if Mike would show a video of a program that we introduced called Faith Healers. Our own church has gone through that program. In fact, what we're doing now, is part of the fruit of that. So, Mike, if you can cue that up and play that, then I'll talk on the other side. Suppose you hired a contractor to build you a house, and on the first day on the job, he rolled up in a bright red, heavy-duty pickup truck and got out of the truck carrying a screwdriver. No hammer, no pliers, no saw, no drill, no leveler, just a screwdriver. Wouldn't you be suspicious of a contractor who claimed he could build a house with only one tool? It's something like that when those of us in the faith community face mental illness in our midst and are armed with only one tool. That one tool may be a very good tool, but it's not the only tool, nor always the right tool for every building situation. This is Dr. C. Dexter Wise III introducing you to Faith Healers. Faith Healers is a 12-step program designed to consciously help make your congregation a center of mental health and wholeness using multiple tools. With Faith Healers, your congregation's leadership and membership will be able to add expert professionals to prayer, add therapy to theology, add workshops to worship, and add the laying out of plans to the laying on of hands. Mental illness attacks us from many directions and in many forms. With Faith Healers, your congregation will be armed with more than a screwdriver to fight it. Remember, soul saving is not whole saving unless it includes mental health. And that's pretty much the gist of what we have. This 12-step program, it can be done in 12 weeks or it can be done in a day. But the basic idea is that in the church, we have not only hid from mental illness, but we haven't known what to do with it, actually. And as I look at this panel, I am very impressed about the level of expertise that all of these people have, and we are blessed because what we're hearing tonight, you had to pay these people to get. They're giving us information that is very, very valuable. And the key is that all of them are believers. And it has been
Right.
difficult for people like the people you see on the screen to go to school, to learn science, to learn medicine, to get PhDs, to get MDs, to get counseling degrees, and then come back to the church and all we say is pray. I mean, it's like, well, there's so many other things that we can do to help with mental illness. And so I use this distinction. I believe in the devil. I don't believe you should worship the devil, but I believe the devil exists. And that there are certain things that affect us that are just demonic. But by the same token, I believe that there are certain things that we have designated as demonic are really a function of disease, of mental disease. And what we've got to do as Christians is ask the Holy Spirit for the discernment to know, is this a disease or is this demonic? Because we can do more damage to a person by, instead of being able to help them with things that are preventable and helpful, it's the devil. No, it ain't the devil. They just need some medicine. And if they get the right medicine, then they'll be okay. So we've got to come to the place in the church where we can allow those people in our church who are experts. These people you're looking at on TV right now, these are experts. I mean, they got PhDs, they got real degrees in this stuff, but they almost have to check their brains at the door when they come to church because we only have one tool. All we know is pray. All we know is lay your hands on. All we know is let's get around. Well, that's great. But you can pray while you're in therapy. You can pray while you're seeing a therapist. I mean, you always pray without ceasing. But what I'm trying to get churches to see, and this is something that I have just recently come to in the last several years, that we need to partner with professionals, especially those professionals in our midst who are already believers. We need to partner with them and see what kind of tools that they can bring to the table. Now, the flip side is that the professionals don't know it all. Because some of this stuff they got on their chart, this ain't a chart thing. This is a spiritual thing. This person got to be saved. I'm sorry, they got to be saved. They need the Holy Ghost. They need Jesus. They need to have this peace that surpasses all understanding. And so we've got to let both sides know. We got to let the professionals know it ain't all about science. Some of it is the spirit. We got to let the spiritual people know it ain't all about the spirit. Some of it is about science. So we've got to ask the Lord, give us the discernment to know, is this the devil or is this a disease? And then as we pray through the whole process, we can bring awareness to it. And what we're doing, thanks to you, Sister Ella, and to our Health Advocacy Ministry, is we're raising the bar. We're making mental illness something that we talk about everywhere. And if we have enough people in our church aware and sensitive to this, even if they don't know how to fix the problem, they know it is a problem. And they'll have resources to go to help people. So what we are, we're faith healers. We're people who heal by faith, heal with faith. And part of that healing is not just laying hands on people, but knowing what kinds of tools to bring to this situation. What kind of water do I bring to this fire? Maybe I don't bring water. Maybe I bring dirt. Maybe I bring sand. How do I put this thing out? How do I fix that? And that's a function of the Holy Ghost.
Thank you, Dr. Wise. I was also going to ask you, but you may have answered that question already, was to tell us about the mental health initiative at Faith Ministries Church. I know we have the faith healers, but there are maybe a couple other things that we're doing there too also. Did you want to talk about that?
Well, actually,
I
I
think
want
one
you
of
to
the
talk about that.
oh, you want me to
Because
talk
you all
about
have
that?
taken the
Okay.
ball
All
and you have really rolled with it. I mean, you guys are going. So maybe you can tell us a little. Don't be bashful. Just tell us a little bit about what we're doing in Faith Ministries.
Okay. In addition to the faith healers at our church, we do have what we have had is workshops. Dr. Wise had a workshop not too long ago where we invited in guest speakers and they each talked on different subjects as it related to mental health. We have also hosted the mental health first aid uh, courses at our church for those who learn how to try and identify folks who are maybe suffering from some type of mental illness and maybe they can identify it. So, it's almost like first aid um, for your heart, but it's first aid for mental health. We've done that. Um, we're trying to have sessions like this so we can address questions about mental health just to keep the conversation going. How'd I do, Dr. Wise?
You did great, but you forgot the little people down there in the box below me. We are the one and only church that has the counseling couple. So not only do we
Well,
talk about it in
I was gonna
special
leave,
activities, we have
I wasn't gonna leave them out, but I was saying it till the
a
end.
monthly broadcast just about mental health, so that
Right,
everybody in our
right.
church can go through this process. And this is tremendous. This is tremendous. So that there's no reason for us not to know. And everybody in church is not going to watch it. But if enough people watch it, we'll be strategically placed so that we'll know what to do. So thank you, Sister Ella. Thank you, Health Advocacy Ministry. You guys took the baton and you're running with it. And I'm telling you that you're doing things that are not being done everywhere, but things that should be done everywhere.
Well, I wasn't gonna leave our couple out. I was gonna give them a bill pitch at the end here, so I wasn't gonna leave them out. I just want to ask a couple of more questions until we maybe get some media questions. Dr. Gunn mentioned earlier that we've been confined with our families, and maybe I don't know if we get to know them better, whatever. But sometimes that confinement with your family brings out things that um, maybe you didn't know was there. All right. So, do you think that during this time that families have uncovered issues that were there before COVID-19? Dr. Gunn?
Oh, definitely. Definitely. And I think, because if you think about it, um, even through the week, if kids are at school 8 hours of the day, if parents at work 8 or 9 hours a day, you only got like this 3 to 4 hour window. And most people don't sit, some people do, but a lot of people don't sit down at dinner and have those talks at dinner time anymore, the dinner table, because there's sports activities, there's extracurricular activities, different ministries that we all get into sometimes. We're always doing things in all places. And so when you're forced to be people all the time, you realize you find that you've always put people in a box sometimes, or you this category, and we're all growing, we're all changing, and we're all being affected one way or another. 19, like the different homes, the different environments you're in, that can bring out different things. Um, you got to think about it too. Some to downsize or move back in with parents, and they haven't been living with that parent in 10, 15 years, or maybe that parent has to move in there with their child because of whatever. And it's like, hold up, two grown women in the house, in a house that's clashing. There's different ideas. And then in the more severe cases, what I've been seeing too is there is there's trauma in certain homes that a lot of people have experienced in the past. And a lot of people will grow up, get to the age of 18, and they want to get away from the trauma. They leave the house, they join the military, they end up going different places, and they run away from that trauma. However, with COVID-19 and to be around people more often, sometimes those hard conversations don't get addressed still, and there's still tension, if you will. And it can bring about some consequences, or some just feelings, again, of just tension. So it's a double-edged sword. It's a double-edged sword, I feel like. And again, faith ministries always, in my opinion, is ahead of the game. The couples counseling that you have there, extra wise, everyone, and even though I'm not a member of the church and I would visit because that's where I was when I was in residency. I've always felt like Faith Ministries was my home. Your church has so many resources for these issues, these things. As Pastor Wash just said, not only just the spiritual, but the mental. And I'm pretty sure if there's something in the church that hasn't been created or birthed yet, you have the resources to get to people to where they need to be. So going back to the original statement of, families and those things, definitely reach out to the Health Advocacy Ministry. I'm pretty sure the couples I'm impressed with the beings. This is just great. Everybody doesn't have that, especially, and I don't mean to digress, especially in time when everyone's talking about divorce, and people not working together, and a lot of people who have divorced over, they have found out they don't like their spouse. They never did like their spouse, but again, so many things happened, and to have a couple, there that's able to help with the church, that this is just amazing. I am in awe again, so I feel like I'm rambling now, but yeah, it has been that way.
Okay. Seneca, I have a question for you. What is the role of school counselors during this time?
That's a loaded
I
question.
mean, how do you interact? What do you
School
interact
counselors.
with the parents? Go ahead.
Oh, can you hear me? I didn't know. Okay.
Hmm.
This has been it's been a hard time with, I'll be honest, with school counselors because um, we're used to seeing students on a daily basis, and students have been at home. And so you fear what's happening in some situations because you cannot see. When they're in our space or in school, at least we can lay eyes on them. We know that they're there. And so if there are some signs of things that may have been happening, we can be there. And so, what I will say about school counselors is now that schools are starting to open back up, it's going to be just as important as having the academics. We pay attention to academics, and school is all about academic outcomes, but we really have to pay attention to the social emotional aspects of the child, the whole child. We have to pay attention to the trauma that may be happening, or we always say you have to Maslow before you bloom, right? You have to make sure that Maslow's those basic needs are met with students and children. And so all of that, I say we haven't seen the fallout of COVID-19 in school because we've had smaller cohorts of kids or smaller groups. And so as we start to come back, really, really paying attention to our students are going to be really, really important, and the parents, right, and the families, because they come from home. And so just being a support for the family is also equally as important.
This question here I have to ask, and Carlos and I kind of talked about this question. He knows what I'm going to ask. We kind of talked about this question when I asked him to be on the show tonight. I was watching one of my news channels one evening, and they were said that the suicide rate among our young children is up. Children as young as 10 years old.
Hmm.
And I just couldn't get over that. I mean, I've been talking about it ever since I heard it, and now I have my professionals here, and we can talk about it. I just could not get over that. And in researching for what we're doing here tonight, I also found that children even younger than that were committing suicide. Now, my question is, how does a 10-year-old and younger, how does a child that young, they may not know the word suicide, but how do they know that action? I mean, how do they make up in their minds at such a young age that I'm being bullied so bad in school, or maybe I have at home, my home life is not that well. My parents are always on me, I'm being abused. But how do they make up in their little minds that they're going to take their lives? Can somebody please answer that question for me? Dr. Gunn?
Yeah. Oh,
Carlos?
Oh, I have things to say. Can can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
Hello?
I
Okay.
can hear
Yes.
you.
Yeah. So the thing for me, historically, suicide, and this is in all the books, this is all the literature. Um, the last demographic of people you would see that will even think about suicide has been the African American women, and um, you never thought about children. You never even put children in that category. And things are increasing on different demographics. But to touch on the children, especially African American children, the the depression, part of depression is suicidal thoughts and thoughts of hopelessness. And you have to sit and think, you say, well, where are these thoughts of hopelessness coming from? Where are these suicidal thoughts coming from? In children that young, you always want to say, where's the trauma? Bullying at school, exposure. There's the old saying that every generation gets wiser, but it gets weaker. We have all this technology, we have all this access to the internet, we have everything at our fingertips, and we don't realize what kids see on the internet. Don't realize what access they have and what influences there are. When I was 10 years old, we did not have a computer in the house. I don't remember getting a computer house until I was in the 8th grade, a desktop computer. And even with the internet, AOL.com, all those things, that's all I kind of knew. But I had to put my mind back and say, if I was 10 years old then, and the things that I am seeing on Instagram, the things that I am seeing elsewhere, it is information overload. Children's brains do not completely form until they're 24, 25 when we're young adults. They're as they're forming, as all the gyrating and all the molecules and all the things are coming into play, and God is orchestrating everything to come together over different years. You have all of that. It's like going back to the baking the cake analogy. You got to stir you got the right ingredients, you got to this, and anything that goes wrong with the cake just falls apart, right? So when the preparation process is so important baking, and when the child is preparing and children are learning sponges at this age, there's so many things that they get to see. Children pick up on energy, vibe, spirits, whatever, the term that you want to call it. And if they're being traumatized at school, and we don't even realize how many children are facing molestation, we don't realize how many children are school molestation. We don't know what they're hearing from kids who's in their home are facing this, and it's information overload. It causes so much anxiety, so much like that it cannot be handled. The body is always going to want to self-preserve itself. It's always going to want to find a way to and sometimes the thought of, if I just escape it, I can get away from it. And the negative part of that is you can't out your body, whatever. So people think about suicide, and it's a way of, a lot of times people say, and I'm pretty sure the council have heard, they say suicide is, why would anybody do suicide? Is an endpoint of a lot of pressure, a lot of things that we will never know that person has experienced. And what I can handle, maybe you can't handle. What you can handle, maybe I can't handle. And then we have to realize that it's not just a thought. Like the neurotransmitters, the serotonin, the dopamine, going back to the tips that the couples are giving. When you do those little things, you don't know how much you're giving out dopamine. You don't know how much you're giving serotonin. These are feel-good molecules that God has blessed our brains with, to go into our bloodstream and to make us feel happy, to lift our mood, to make us feel rewarded. We have reward centers in our brain. We have all these things in our brain to make us who we are. And when that stress and that overload of life, and these kids are given life, they are getting the life early, depletes it quality of those meals. And when they're not in the right, when they're not in the right quantity, that can bring up thoughts of suicide. And so when you think of that, when you think about a 10-year-old, it's easy to say, like, Miss Ella, I'm the same way. I used to be frightened, got I was like, oh, it don't get that bad. It can, but for some people, unfortunately, it can't know what they're going through and how their brain is handling everything. And the bad thing thought about it is they're showing children how to kill themselves. Now, it's one thing to think it, it's another thing for me to figure out how to do it.
Right.
You know, and there's so many. You could just Google it. How do I this? How do I? Nobody Googles it now. Don't nobody Google it. But there are so many things that the access, that the children have, and not only that, they're getting from the children are cutting. Children are cutting. Now, there's also non-suicidal, injurious behavior. That means they don't want to kill. They have suicidal thoughts, and they cut, and they'll cut their arms. They'll cut their forearms. They'll cut their elbows. They'll cut their legs, and you'll see just all these lines, And so why are they doing that? The children are so depressed. They're so numb that cutting releases endorphins. These are happy molecules. And instead of, they cut because they don't feel anything, and cutting makes them feel something.
Mm.
Cutting makes them feel something. And again, it's up to all of us to be educated to know how to fight it. So we can rise and be educated, so we can know how to save our children, save our babies, save our young adults. And even with the young teenagers and the young adults, the one thing about adults, and I have to go into this while we're on it, what their face is emerging adulthood. And what that is that, we studied children's infants, and we were studying toddlers, and we said, the age of 3, you should be doing this. By the age of 8, you should be doing this. By the age of this, you should be having this. And by the age of whatever, 18, hey, you're out the door. You're grown, you're an adult. Not necessarily anymore, because society has also changed. And there's a lot of pressure on our young people, our young adults, our 20-year-olds. There was a time when, for some people, I'm from a very small town here, and some people graduated, went to the military. We talk about Alabama. That was it. Some people got out of high school, worked in the factory. That was it. Some people just had everything laid out for them. But now, sometimes young people are overwhelmed. Who am I? What do I want to do? What's my purpose? They don't even know how to figure out their purpose. I knew what I wanted to be when I was young. And I tell people all the time, that's great and good. But my brother, who was 6 years older than me, he didn't really know what he wanted. We came from the same house. He didn't really know what he wanted to be. He just turned 30 this year, and he opened up a successful trucking company. But it took him this whole decade of his 20s, of falls and rises, to figure it out. The depression, and those that are young people are feeling because they don't know who they are, their purpose, causing depression. It's also causing thoughts of suicide, because if I don't know my purpose, why am I here? And if I'm not
And
here,
Dr. Gunn,
then
we're kind of losing you. We're kind of losing you. So let's see if the
oh,
beings have a thought about that. We're losing you. I don't know
go
why, but
ahead.
we're losing you. So, Carlos, did you and Seneca want to add to that?
I did have a couple of thoughts. The other thing you asked about a 10-year-old, and they don't always process that suicide is finite. Like it's once that happens, it happens, and so their little brains don't make that connection because we play video games, right? And what happens in the video game, the character dies, but then they come back, and then I can play it again. And so sometimes I notice with younger kids, they don't make that connection, and so they have access and they can see all of this stuff. And when they are going through that depression in those spaces, I definitely have noticed that our kids are also very impulsive. We live in a microwave society, and so everything is rapid, and so they don't always think about. I notice with a lot of kids, when they run into a situation, instead of thinking through the steps to get through it, they just want to give up. I just can't do this anymore. And so a couple of those pieces I wanted to talk about. And in the schools, I'll be honest, Nationwide Children's Hospital has a program called Signs of Suicide. And so we've really started to make sure that our counselors and everyone are trained in signs of suicide and really being able to recognize some of these signs with children, because I've worked with kids that were cutting, that, had a plan and there's a whole lot of things that you have to do when children come to you in that space. And then the other thing that I wanted to point out, not just 10-year-olds, but when we're thinking about high performing students, we have to be mindful of our high performing students, because we think just because this child has straight A's and they are in all these sports and they have all these things, oh, that child has it together. Oh no. Our children that are high performing, they have a sense of wanting to be perfect, and that anxiety and depression and all those things that if I don't live up to with everyone else wants me to live up to, I'm really going to have a hard time. So I really want us to also be mindful of our young people that are doing really well. We have to check in on them too.
What are the signs? I mean, what kind of signs do we look for in these young kids as to what they're dealing with? If that's a thought that they may have, can you give us some signs? How do we know? The mother of this 10-year-old that I saw in the news, she had no signs. She didn't say anything about her daughter that she thought would make her want to commit suicide. So what do we look for? What do these parents look for?
It's tough, Sister Forney, because unless you have that relationship with your child and you're like communicating with them on a regular basis, which is very important, it can be challenging to notice those signs. I know with our boys, I think Dr. Gunn, someone mentioned it earlier, a lot of families don't sit together and eat dinner anymore. Seneca makes sure we eat dinner. Now, I might not want to do it. I might want to watch ESPN in the basement, but she makes sure we gonna eat dinner together every night.
And we don't have phones.
And no phones. Yeah, it's one of her rules. So we sit down together. We have those times to talk. Now, sometimes the boys don't talk a whole lot, but we get a little bit from them. And so having those conversations can help just to do those check-ins. And so obviously that's one way, but then the other thing too is to make sure that if you notice things are different about your child. So if your child is outgoing, if they're one that's a little social, and then all of a sudden things for whatever reason are different, but they're telling you nothing is wrong, there's probably something that's happened. And so you don't want to be on them all the time, but you definitely want to continue having that conversation while letting the child get to the point where they're ready to share. But you as the parent want to make sure that you're in a position where you've opened the dialogue so that when the child is ready, they're ready to come to you and talk. The worst thing you can do is just assume nothing is wrong and I don't need to talk to my child and those things. Keep that communication open. And that's probably one of the best ways, without being a mind reader, to be able to figure out if a child is on the verge. The other thing is also making sure that if a child is cutting, more than likely they have tools in their room. I check my kids' rooms. Here's the thing. I don't believe in locked doors. This is my house. This is our house. So they're squatters. So they follow my rules in this house. There are no locked doors. I check your rooms until you're 18 and you move out. So if I find something, I'm going to ask you about it. And so I think those things are very important. Be a parent, ask those questions. Don't be afraid. And if you feel confused about how to ask those questions, reach out for help. But keeping communication open is paramount. It's very important.
Mhm.
Right. Okay. I don't know if we have any media questions, but I'm going to ask one last question. Um, it's already hard for African Americans to take that first step and seek help. Again, in doing this research, I found that, we keep talking about disparities in a regular, going to the doctor, regular health, disparities in mental health. So again, I had a friend, I do a lot of talking about these topics because I'm trying to gain information before I get to it. And I had a conversation with my granddaughter, as a matter of fact, and she and her boyfriend were here to visit. And he had a friend who went through some mental problems, who went to the doctor, and they just put him on some pills and let him go. And I thought, okay, was there any conversation? Did he keep going back? He's like, no, we just prescribed him some pills, and that was the end of it.
Mm.
Is that what they do with us? They just give us a pill and send us on? Or, you know, maybe this is a question for you, Dr. Gunn. When do you decide when to prescribe medication to somebody? Can you hear
You
me?
said when do I decide?
When do you decide that now I need to prescribe medication, or you just give the medication? Okay, I'll see you next week, 2 weeks, and I'll give you some more medication.
I am as big a proponent of therapy as I am medicine. Are you able to hear me?
Mm-hmm.
I hear you.
Okay, I'm so slow. Thank y'all. I'm in a very area, so um I can tell. So I'm a biggest proponent of therapy as I am medicine. If you're not suicide, if you are suicidal, like actively suicidal, actively homicidal, you're psychotic and you would benefit from treatment. That's what an involuntary form says when someone you're going to be committed to hospital. But if you're harm to self, others, or psychotic, then I'm going to really encourage medication. However, patients who have good insight, good coping skills, all put on them. I believe in education. I always make sure that there's at least 10 to 15 minutes at the end of the sessions, the evaluations that I have, where I'm educating about them about what I think is going on, what I think the treatment plan should be, and I want to hear from them. Because I got one shot, I got one mic, I got one chance sometimes to get it right, because a lot of times people struggle into the office, and if I don't make this evaluation personal for them, I'm gonna lose them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I don't make it about me, I make it about a team effort. And a lot of times I'm okay with the patient just want to do therapy. I will check on you in a couple of weeks, I'll check on you in a month. I give you time. I tell people I'm not going to pressure you into doing anything you don't want to do, as long as you're not a harm to yourself or others. Now, if they're harm to yourself and others, we might have to have hospitalization, or we may need to talk about, the medication. And I'm going to educate you on why the medication I'm giving you is what I want to give you, because I want to gain a rapport of trust with you.
Mm-hmm.
Because there is that stigma. There's a stigma, and I feel like the only way we're going to break the stigma is if we bring awareness. We're going to bring awareness if we educate. So, no, I don't push meds. I don't want to be called a med pusher. I really have a conversation before doing anything.
Okay. Thank you for that. I guess we don't have any media questions. I'm surprised. This is the first time. Maybe because we started late, they thought maybe we weren't here. But
I think Pastor Wise
yeah,
has a question.
Dr. Wise, question. Oh, okay. We do have questions. Go on, Dr. Wise, you're first.
Box there, and we haven't heard from her the whole time. So, Don, if you want to give us some reflections on all of this stuff that we've talked about, you're sitting there, and I know you have opinions on these things.
I've lived them. I've enjoyed everything you guys have said. Seneca, Carlos, awesome. Um, Dr. Gunn, awesome. Thank you, Seneca, for mentioning that high performing student because that was me. And at the same time, I was high performing in high school and college, straight A's. If I got a B, I would go into a fit. It sent me, I had really high anxiety and I had to be treated for it. And it took me until I was 40 to be able to tell people readily that. Um, so I too want to break the stigma related to mental illness. And I also want to say, as a biologist, as a geneticist, that I don't know why we as humans separate our head from the rest of our bodies. We act like mental, that like your brain is not a part of your body and your brain is controlling the rest of you. And I always tell people, you think you're in control, but what we know from neuroscience is that a whole lot of the control in your life is chemistry.
That's right.
And we as believers don't understand that what we put in our bodies and the chemicals our bodies are made up are making choices for us every day.
Yeah.
So we need to ask God for that discernment on everything about ourselves and not separate our mental health from our physical health because it's all one. If you cut that head off, it doesn't matter what's going on in your body, you're dead. So, so thank you guys for all the stuff you said.
Yes.
Thank you, Don. I think I saw a question across the bottom. Mike, do we have a
Yeah.
question?
So Brenda Spencer asked, "Will you let your children get the shot?" She's gone back to the virus. I
Okay.
guess that's Carlos as well, Carlos and Seneca, as well as Dr. Gunn. She has babies. They have growing boys.
Yeah, we've talked about it here in the Bing household. So full transparency, our boys have been home studying virtually while the school is open, but they've been home. And we do plan to send them back in the fall face to face. But as we begin thinking about that, because they need to go back, as we begin thinking about that, we have talked about the possibility of them taking the shot, and we just don't know yet. We're leaning towards that direction because we both have it.
Right.
Um, so more than likely, they're going to take the shot.
Okay. Yes. Thank you. Any more questions, Mike? If not, we'll have some final thoughts. We'll end it for the evening. Dr. Wise, you want have a final thought?
No, I'm just very appreciative of what you're doing, and little by little, little by little, and it may not seem like a lot, but it's huge for us to even have this conversation, because there are people who have heard themselves. They've heard their name called without their name called. They're like, he's talking about me, she's talking about me, and that helps them realize, first of all, that they're not unique, and that their situation is treatable, is helpable. And so I continue to applaud what you all are doing in your health advocacy ministry, expanding it beyond just the heart to the head, to the mind, to the spirit. And as we continue to do that, I'm sure we're going to be able to help impact people's lives, not just in our church, but those that we touch around the world.
And I also, before we end, I do want to mention, because I have not forgotten about our counseling couple, that they do have their session the third Thursday, right? The third Thursday of the month. And this week, that is the 20th. Is that correct? So
Yes.
tune in on May 20th at 7 o'clock for our counseling couple. Thank you all so much for joining us this evening. It's been a great conversation. I hope we had some audience because it has been great and I loved it. Thank you so much. And everyone, tune in again next month for another session of Healthy Hints from Ham. Bye, everybody. Thank you.